I'm a sucker for a free piece of furniture, even if it is dated gold and slightly broken. I knew this piece had potential though. The minute that I saw it without the shelves, I thought, yes, this would be a perfect entryway nook. It was nice and narrow. Imagine being able to put shoes in this cabinet. You could have baskets, put school bags, put some hooks into the opening and put hats or the dog lead or your keys. So a functional storage option. The first thing I did was remove the plugs that hold all of the shelves in place. Then I removed the doors completely because I wanted to paint the internal part of this cupboard and the little nook area, and it's just easier to get into a tight space like that when you don't have the doors on. I also removed that top bit of decorative trim and got all of the little nails out, and I had no intention of putting it back onto this piece. I then gave everything a deep clean. I got my vacuum cleaner out. I made sure to get into all of those grooves. I sprayed some crud cutter on and gave it a wipe over, and then came around with some plain hot water just to remove any residue that might be sitting on the surface. While that was drying, I mixed up some 2-part gap filler. So this is the one that is the paste, and then you have the activator. So it's a chemical reaction. Once you mix them together, it starts to harden. The important thing to note with this is the more of the activator you put into your mix, the quicker it is going to go off. So if you have a lot of little things that you are trying to fill, then I would recommend mixing it up a little bit weaker. So putting less of that red tube or blue tube, whatever activator color you have, into the mix so you've got more work time. I had all of these little holes to fill except for the 2 at the very top. I left those. So I mixed up with very little activator in my mix so that I had that work time and it was still easy to push the product into the holes and I didn't have to mix up again. While that was setting, I got started on the doors. I used an old sanding disc in this VJ groove. I got my carbide scraper out to get into the corners of this insert where my orbital sander wouldn't be able to get to, and I used my Dremel with a sanding attachment on the routed edge. Once the gap filler was completely dry, I smoothed it down with 240 grit sandpaper and continued that same 240 grit around the nook area where I was going to be painting and inside the cupboard. Once I'd removed all of the dust, it was time to apply my primer, and because I had sanded down to raw timber in a couple of places, especially around where I was trying to get it smooth, where I had filled those shelving holes, I went in with the shellac based primer, and this is because I didn't want to risk getting any tannin bleed coming out of that pine, and shellac based primer will block tannin bleed, as will an oil based primer. To ensure I'm getting the smoothest finish possible, I always sand in between my primer and my paint coats with a high grade of sandpaper. I'm using 600 grit sandpaper here lightly with a sponge. It just knocks out any dust, debris, anything that might have landed in the paintwork or texture from your spray gun. You just want to make sure that you remove all of the dust with a microfiber cloth before you apply your next coat of paint. For my color choice on this one, I wanted a fresh off-white. I didn't want a really harsh, clean, bright white. So I chose Porter's Paint's Irish Linen, and this is in their Aqua Satin, which is a trim paint. I did a total of 2 coats of the Irish Linen on the top and the bottom, and I didn't use a poly top coat. Now you're probably wondering at this point what was happening with all of that orange timber, but I actually came back after painting to do the sanding. I just felt like it was a more time efficient way of being able to do this piece because there was minimal overspray from spraying in that internal nook area and the cupboard, and it just felt like I didn't want to tape off all of the timber to do the painting after, so I kind of did it in reverse. I started off with 120 grit sandpaper and then moved up the grades, finishing with 240 grit. Once I'd finished sanding, I measured up and drilled some holes to hang some hooks and moved on to paint washing. Prior to doing any paint washing, I like to wet the surface down to see what the timber is going to do once it has been sealed. This helps me to determine what colors are going to be going into my paint wash. I wanted an almost driftwood dusty taupe tone for this piece, so I went in with a green based paint wash with a little bit of beige in it, and if you have my raw timber furniture flipping guide, this is my dusty taupe paint wash mix that you can find on the cheat sheet. I applied 3 coats of this paint wash, speeding up my dry time in between with my hairdryer, and then coming back with 600 grit sandpaper in between each coat to make sure that I was eliminating any raised grain. I opted to use the same handles that I would be on the cabinet doors as the hooks in the nook area. These had the depth that they still could be used as a hook, but I absolutely loved the antique brass look of them, and I thought the shape was really pretty as well. It was almost like a little Easter egg. My final steps on this flip were to reinstall the doors with those new handles on and to seal the timber. And for that, I chose Fiddes Supreme Wax Polish in the color Light, working with the grain and applying one coat, not buffing it out to get that really beautiful matte finish. So guys, just a reminder of where we were, and this is where we are now. It's light, it's bright, it's a practical piece of furniture. I love that you can still see that beautiful timber grain, and I think those aged brass handles really elevate the whole look, ties it all together. As always though, I would love to know what you guys think, so jump in the comments and let me know, is this one a nail or a fail?